updating the OPPD website and by mailing such notice to each of the district directors on May 2nd, 2007. So welcome. We'll get started right away and go right into finance.
Safety briefing. Sorry about that. I'll do a quick safety briefing. We're on the 9th floor of the west side of Energy Plaza. If we need to exit this building, we would use the elevators all the way down to the first level and then exit out on the 17th Street side. Unless there is a fire, we would not use the elevators, we would use the steps, which evidently some of you already came up because we were having one elevator problem. The fire extinguisher is right here behind us. The AED and the first aid kit is in the hallway to the right of the elevators, one on top of each other. Is anybody here certified in the use of an AED or in CPR? Okay, very good. We have some folks here. And Mark, could you call 911 in the event that we need it? I appreciate that. If you have a medical condition, please write it down or tell your neighbor. Any questions to the, looks like we have good weather, so I won't do a storm warning here, but any questions of the safety briefing? Very good, thank you. And we met our commitment to safety in our meetings, so thank you.
All right, with that, we'll get going with the Finance Committee report. Director Early, you want to give that or someone else?
Sure.
Thank you, Tammy.
All right, we'll start with the April financial report. If you turn to the revenue slides, we'll start with revenue. So retail revenue for the month of April was $65.7 million, which was $3.1 million over budget. The majority of this over budget is related to the industrial category. We had some large customers that had been scheduled to be on outage and they had operational changes, and then some expansions came in quicker than we had projected. So $3.1 million over budget for the month. Year to date, the retail revenue is $268.5 million, which is 0.7% under budget. So right on budget for the first 4 months of the year with retail revenue. Off-system sales is the next category, and for the month of April, off-system sales was $9.6 million, which was $3.5 million over budget. This is due to additional wind production and the ability to sell that into the off-system market. Year-to-date, off-system sales is $47.5 million, which is $11.5 million over budget. Turning to the expense side of the equation, operating and maintenance expense, excluding fuel and purchase power for April, was $24.9 million. That was $3.6 million under budget. Now, about $2 million of this under budget is actually timing on NC2 expenses. We're in a major turbine outage, which is right on schedule, but the invoicing for some of those things will happen in the next month. So part of that you will see coming in next month. Year-to-date non-fuel O&M expenses is $102.8 million, which is $6.1 million under budget. Fuel and purchase power category for April was $20.3 million, which is $2.3 million over budget. And again, that's additional wind production that we're seeing on the purchase power contracts. Year-to-date, the fuel and purchase power expenses are $96.1 million, which is $8.1 million over budget. And then the last category is other expenses and income. This is a net, so the expenses are larger in this category. They're offset by small income amounts. And this category includes Fort Calhoun Station decommissioning and write-off, depreciation expense, payment in lieu of taxes, and interest income, and then those are offset with other electric revenues and investment income. So for the month of April, this category is $26.1 million, which is $3.2 million under budget, and year-to-date, this category is $115.2 million, which is 0.5% over budget. When you add all those up for net income for the month of April, net income was $3.9 million, which is $11.2 million over budget. And year-to-date, the net income is $1.9 million, which is 7.2 over budget. The projection for net income for year-end is consistent with our budget amount. We've not need to change that projection, so that's still $66.5 million. Then if you turn to cash, capital expenditures for April was $7.1 million. That's $5.7 million under budget. Again, this is majority is due to the NC2 outage, turbine outage, and we'll see those capital expenditures coming in next month. The capital expenditures for the year to date is $27.5 million, which is $34.5 million under budget. And this variance is really due to our new capital process and the way we're prioritizing and creating efficiency in our capital options. So I would expect that to hold for a good portion of the year. And when you look at cash, unrestricted cash at the end of April was $349.5 million, which is $40.5 million over budget. That the majority of that is derived for the underspend in cash or in capital. And the cash balance excludes $23.2 million of restricted NC2 participant funds. That's the end of the financials for April. Are there any questions?
Tammy, just how many days of cash would we have on hand with that extra 300?
About 170.
That's what we over on.
Yeah, our target is a minimum of 100.
Right.
Yeah.
Tammy, would you please remind me why we're $40 million over our projected budget on cash?
So 34 of it is coming from, we haven't spent as much money on capital.
Yeah, okay.
And then the other 6 was, there was a variance from when we did the budget in October, November, and where we ended up with cash at the end of the year.
Nice. Good. Thank you.
Any other questions on financials?
Nope.
Legal fees and expense report?
Just keep going. Okay, so the next item from the Finance Committee is a reporting item. This is a report that we do on a quarterly basis. This is our legal fees and expenses for the first quarter of 2017. And legal fees and expenses were paid to General Counsel Fraser Stryker in the amount of $318,013.61. This included a variety of services ranging from contracting to regulatory transmission issues, environmental regulations, claim settlement, general labor and benefits support, and then litigation that is normal with conducting our business. All of these expenses are reviewed by the responsible departments and then go through an approval process.
Any questions?
Just curious, is this typical? I don't have any context for the number.
Yeah, this is about the
Oh,
normal of
yeah.
what happens.
That's
Yeah.
where we are.
Yeah,
It's a-
I mean, there can be,
Yeah, probably a tiny bit higher, but not by much, than you've seen over the last couple of quarters, and no particular reason, just probably a variety, in fact, I know a variety of things, labor and employment, some regulatory, that were just up a little bit in that
Yeah.
quarter, but it's really in a pretty narrow band, typically.
Questions? You want to cover the retirement plan?
sure. So the next reporting is a reporting item, and this is our quarterly report on our retirement plan. And as you all know from your personal investments, it's been a pretty good quarter in the markets. Our ending balance for the retirement plan on March 31st was $942.7 million. And this compares to the beginning balance at the beginning of the quarter was $905.2 million. So the flows in and out for the quarter, employees contributed $2.6 million, OPPD contributed $13.3 million, and then the benefit payments were $23 million. The investment in the market was an increase of $44.6 million. At the end of the quarter, we had an allocation of 55% to equity and 45% invested in fixed incomes, and this is within the investment policy guidance that's been approved by the board. Then when you look at the sector performance, you can see U.S. equities for the quarter returned 6% compared to the index of 5.6. International equities returned 9.5% compared to the index of 9. Domestic fixed income returned 1% compared to the index of 1.1, and this is the only category that we fell behind the index. And global fixed income was 3.7 compared to 2.4. Total plan returned 4.9% compared to the index of 4.5. So just a little bit about the markets in general. Equity markets have been up across the whole world, and that's due to the optimism about U.S. economy and then signs of growth in Europe. The U.S. equities, when you measure them off the S&P 500, gained 6.1%, and that was boosted by solid corporate earnings. And then when you look at internationals, the international developed markets returned 7.3%, and the emerging markets outperformed everything with 11.5%. You turn to fixed income in the U.S., gain was 0.6% or 0.8%, I'm sorry. And this lower return was really based on anticipation of additional Fed increases in the interest rate. And then international fixed income did a little bit better. It was at 2%, and this was as investors moved more into bonds because of political uncertainty. The next page shows you our individual managers and their returns for the quarter, and then their deviations from their individual indexes. Our plan returned 4.9% in total, and then that was 0.4% above all of the indexes. The last graph shows you just the growth in the fund. This is market value over a 10-year period starting 2007 to 2017. And you can see in 2007, the planned investment value was a little over $650 million. And we had the large dip with the recession, and then it's been a steady growth path since then. And then where we're ending this quarter is $942 million in the fund. And that's about 70% funded, so.
Hey, Ken, I got a question, and this probably answered before, and I'm forgot to answer this. As far as the contributions to the system, I realize the employee contributions will come out of the payroll, probably goes in 2 weeks, I suppose.
Right.
As far as when the decision is made, how much the district needs to support the plan, is that decision made and the money contributed monthly, is it quarterly,
Yeah.
is it as needed?
No, we make a deposit on a monthly basis. We have the choice to do it at the end of the year, but you get investment gains if you're contributing on a monthly basis, so we choose to do that. And it helps with your rate structure that way and your cash flows that way too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
This is about the best report we've had in quite a while, so.
It really is. Hopefully it'll continue.
Hopefully it'll continue.
Personally also.
All right.
Yes.
There's two claims reports. Who wants to give those? Just settlements.
So I'll just kind of set them up real quick. These are reporting claims. We report claim settlements over $50,000 to the board. We have 2 of them to report this month. The first one is related to a highway project, and it's at 192nd and Q, and there was some erosion around that work, and Mr. Dogman's, Vice President Dogman's group will report on that one. And then the second one is around some frozen pipes that were in an individual's house, and Vice President Comstock's group will report on that one. What do you want to start with first?
These are part of a statutory requirement for us to report these to the board in a public venue. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the first one, Manager of Distribution Engineering, Cheryl McGuire, will give a presentation and go through the process.
Thank you.
Good morning. As was stated, this claim was in regard to a road project. It was on Q Street from 183rd to 192nd. But where the actual claim took place was 192nd and Q. So basically, we were installing a manhole duct line system on the south and west side of this intersection. Just to give you a little bit of the timeline, we start any road project usually a year in advance, depending on how long our construction will take place. That way we are complete with our construction before either the county, the city, or the state comes in to do their projects. So we started in the fall of 2014 with our manhole duct line construction. Douglas County then is their project, so they came in 2015. And when they were on the intersection of 192nd, they observed some settling of our trench. So they inquired with OPPD, the Elkhorn crews, and they came out and recompacted the area. In May of 2016, then Douglas County was starting to pave that intersection and noticed after heavy rains that our trench was settling again. So they contacted OPPD again, and then in July of 2016, OPPD agreed to have Douglas County make the repairs on the compaction, and then it did subsequently result in repairs to pavement that they've already did. So this just shows you some pictures. This was our duct line path on Q Street before we did recompaction, so this was about 6 to 8 months after we installed the duct line. It was settling, and then after we recompacted, this is a picture probably about 3 months after recompaction, it was starting to settle again. Then Douglas County came in and paved basically from 193rd coming east to 192nd on Q Street, and as you can see, we had settlement here in the soil which continued underneath the pavement, so they did take out the pavement and then recompact under the pavement and repaved. So that's why the claims came in at $118,000. So from this claim, we took some steps to prevent this ever happening again. So we took it to our enterprise risk management team and presented it there, and then as a group, we decided what would be the best way to mitigate this risk in the future. So what we came up with is anytime that we are constructing a duct line system that might be in the grassway, but then we're going to cross a road, we will recompact with flowable fill, which is a non-structural concrete mixture, so it will act as compacted soil, but you can still dig through it. You don't have to jackhammer if anybody has to come and dig it up at a later date. If we are constructing duct lines, though, that will be in an existing road where we are removing pavement to put in our duct line, or it's in what we call the green space or the grassy area, but through road construction, they're going to be putting a lane over top of us, so there'll be future pavement on top of us, then we will hire an engineering firm to test our compaction behind us just to make sure that our crews are properly compacting. And then in other trenching situations, in our house services, we used to install the services from our PEDs to the house, and now we've changed that policy and we are requiring the customer to put in a conduit. And so they recompact the soil over the conduit, and then we pull our cables in. So that has reduced quite a bit of our trenching claims there. And then we will provide yearly training to any and all crews who might be doing any type of recompacting of soil, not just our underground crews. So hopefully everyone is trained on our standards of compaction so that we don't have this claim in the future. Any questions?
Sure, I got a question. I mean, that's obviously a bigger problem, but, I mean, is there a lot of smaller problems like this that you need to make all these other steps, or is this a one-time thing?
I will result to the claims department. Have we
You're
seen a
talking
lot
about
more than just this?
operationally,
This
though.
is the
Yeah,
first
I
one
All
that,
these other
Yeah, I think-
operational changes, is this just a one-time fluke deal, or is this?
Yeah, I would say this is really, it doesn't happen very often, it's a one-time thing. We do have a smaller ones, but usually the weather kind of, affect that. You can't compact it, like if it's, temperature is very low. So by the time you get there, that may happen, but this is not typical.
So was it performance out in the field that a standard that we have for compaction was not followed, or?
I would say yes, we need to improve that, and that's why we're going back and doing the training, and that's why we're going back and making sure that we test that, so we're ensuring that that doesn't happen again. So obviously, yeah, we could have done a better job, and we did not.
And I appreciate the fact that we were putting in place a process that allows our employees to succeed. So having a firm test out in the field, I think, is a good step. Phil, I don't have experience with it, but trust your engineering judgment as an improvement, having the training. But the question, I think, is back to how this happened. Did we have a process that was not followed at some point? I mean, we do have a standard for compaction. So was it end of the day, or, you know, I mean, was there some circumstance there?
Yeah, I don't have those, I don't have the specifics about that, but I do know that the process that we have, we've done it for a while now, and it's been successful. And I think what added to this, that when we agreed to go ahead and have the city do that, we didn't know that there was a pavement issue. That's, at that time, the cost was much, much lower. But then, through that time, then the additional damage was taken. So to be direct and answer your question, yeah, we have a process. We thought we followed it, but obviously we didn't do it, in a good way. So that's why we're going back and we're training everybody, and we're making sure that people are following the process, and we're taking the additional step to make sure that we test it and to ensure that the process was followed and that the compaction is good.
And I think that's brilliant. To me, there are so many processes that have to happen within this huge organization. And I love our reliability testing on providing power. This is another process. And so here's an instance where it wasn't to the reliability standard that we would like to hold ourselves to. And so I think you've done a good job of addressing that. And I just wonder if the payout, I'm just thinking out loud here, might be a reliability indicator as we look at measures for our processes. Is that something that we would look at over time? We've had fewer payouts. Just a thought.
We certainly do those and see those reports on an annual basis on the number of claims that we have across the whole district, right? Whether it's, stepping on a gutter to backing over a flower pot to something like this. And so, we typically see relatively low claims. I think the Fraser-Schrecker folks would say this would be a very low claim organization in that regard. And we typically, outside of these unusual ones, we typically, well below $250,000 a year in these kinds of claims. And then what we do individually across the organizations, what we've done is that budget requirement goes back out to those organizations that has the claim. So what we've now seen in the organization is that those parts of the organization get a deeper dive in those claims and understanding kind of the root cause to it, and what are the mitigating circumstances around it, and how do we then put together mitigation strategies to prevent it going forward.
It is incredible the amount of interactions and potential exposure that the district faces on a daily basis. The low number we have. Hopefully it's good based on sound policy, and also heads up by our
And I think the conversation that Mr. Dogman and I have had, on this as an example, is that the other contributing factor was weather, right? Severe rain, significant rain over multiple periods of days. Projects like this, it probably would behoove us to go back out and do that inspection after long periods of those rains, just to validate that our compaction is meeting that standard, even after we take these mitigating strategies out for those large projects across roadways, certainly, but other large duct projects as well.
I think it's important to point out too that we do have the enterprise risk management program now too, that has helped us with these corrective actions. You know, I think that's a good tool that we've put in into our policy and our processes, and I think that really helps in the situation. There's always going to be some, you know, it's impossible not to make a mistake once in a while. You know, there's always a possibility of human error and everything. That's why you have corrective actions. You go back and look, and you look at enterprise risk management. And this situation, I think, will hopefully prevent that from happening again.
And to Director Yoder's point, you know, we have a lot of processes, but this is the continuous improvement that we're always reviewing,
Always.
figuring out what we need to do better and put things in place and continue to improve. So we'll definitely do that with that one.
Okay. Who's covering the cert? Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Who's covering
Thank
the
you.
cert?
Appreciate it.
So, Donna Miner, who's the manager of customer operations, is going to review the circumstances that resulted in some frozen pipes at a residential property, doing some significant damage. Thank you, Donna.
Good morning. I'm going to present the information for the frozen pipe claim at 14603 Saratoga Street. So this is the timeline. On October the 6th, the customer requested a turn-off service order. The rep entered and completed the service order in the same day. No physical disconnect was made that day. Then on October the 19th, the call center received another call from the customer, and the service order was re-entered with an incorrect year. So it was entered as 10/19/19. Then on December the 12th, an analyst discovered the service order had an incorrect year and changed the year to 10/19/16, which automatically triggered the service order to go out the next day, and the service was disconnected, causing the frozen pipes. The total cost of the claim is $142,705.41. Here are some pictures from the claim. Steps to prevent future claims. We revisited training with the call center reps to stress the importance of entering correct dates in our process. The next thing is the customer service will monitor all service order dates. If they're incorrect or abnormal dates, we will contact the customer as appropriate. If we're unable to contact the customer, we will maintain the service. And then the last thing is the customer service will review our weather policies and procedures with our key stakeholders each fall to ensure that all weather policies are followed. Are there any questions?
Any questions? It's amazing what 2 digits will do.
Yes, it is.
And I think getting back to Director Yoder's comments previously, I think Julie and the call center team and Don and the team have done a deep dive with all the call center staff regarding this claim
Yes.
specifically, but others that we may see in the future as well. So.
Yes.
Hey, Don, I had a quick question.
Yes.
How'd they get to the figure of was it 142?
Yes.
Did they have to tear down the house or?
Well, I will. Can I have claims come up and give you the breakdown of the? Thank you.
I'm Lisa Huff, I'm the manager of risk management, and I manage the claims area. So the claim breaks down different components. The biggest part is about 90,000 of it is repairs to the home, and then there's about 25,000 of it with about mold remediation. There's also a portion of the claim that's settlement for them to move out of the home while the repairs are being completed. And then there's also like storage, and there's some furniture and some housewares that we had to replace as well. So that's kind of the compromise of all the settlements we had to go through.
Was the power only off for one day, or was it off from October to December?
It started in December.
Yes, it started in December when we turned it off, December the 13th.
The customer was out of the country.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
So
the water was running, I think, for multiple days.
it ran through December the 13th through December the 22nd.
Oh. Okay.
Yes.
I'll fill it up. You kind of know. All right, thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, anything else in the finance? Anything else?
They still charge it.
All right. Director McGuire, cover nuclear oversight.
Yeah, we had a nuclear oversight committee meeting, which I attended, and I'm gonna have, we had a very, very good month, I wanna say, as far as our regulators and as far as progress on the decommissioning, and I'm gonna have Mary Fisher report first, and then John Hanson will do the oversight.
Good morning, thank you, Director McGuire. As Director McGuire indicated, we had a month, and actually since the first of the year, we've had a number of inspections at Fort Calhoun. All of the inspections have resulted in, I would say, very good results. We've had 3 insurance inspections for different things. We also had a security inspection from the NRC, and we've had a decommissioning oversight committee meeting where 3 experienced individuals from externally came in and reviewed everything that we were doing in decommissioning. All of those resulted in very positive results. The intent of bringing in the decommissioning oversight committee is to help us prevent any missteps in our decommissioning, so they always have room for improvement, and we listened quite carefully to them. In January, we made those improvements. They left us with some more this round, but overall, I think it was a very good report. I will say that the decommissioning progress this month has slowed. It has slowed significantly due to a number of employees that we've loaned to the Nebraska City outage. And so while we have people working there, we had over 3,800 hours that we supported the Nebraska City 2 outage, turbine outage. And so that was a great collaboration and a huge priority for OPPD, and it was our pleasure to be able to support that.
And just normally we would have to outsource that manpower, so we were able to keep it in the company and save us some money for the whole company. That was the biggie there.
One of our lean initiatives has been around insourcing rather than outsourcing, and to really focus that. And I think it's been certainly accepted by our employees too. And this is kind of unique. Typically, it's gone the other way, right? So when the support is needed, we'll have folks from the fossil go to the nuclear, but probably not on a regular basis. We've had the nuclear folks go to the fossil side. This was a little unique in that regard, but I think it speaks to kind of the enterprise-wide approach that Mary and John and the rest of the team, are kind of living to make sure we have the highest corporate priority at that time, and we put the resources behind it internally, and that's just a great example of that. So.
Right. So as I said, the overall schedule has slowed quite a bit, but we maintain schedule and budget, and continue to move forward and implement the suggestions that we got from all of the entities that have been out to provide inspections and feedback on the decommissioning. A bit about the people side, I'll report out on that. Through May 5th, we've had 98 resignations, 48 retirements, 60 terminations, and 40 transfers out of Fort Calhoun. And that concludes my report.
Can you talk a little bit about Energy Solutions and how they're working with us?
Energy Solutions, I believe at the last meeting I indicated that we were off to a bit of a slow start, but we're off to a bit of a slow start because we've been very, I would say, picky about the people that come. We want to make sure that they're providing us the greatest value and that they're providing it in the manner in which we would expect from them. So we've been a bit picky about the people that have come. I'm glad to report that they are fully staffed now, and we believe that we are getting the value out of them that we had anticipated when we brought them in to help support us in the decommissioning.
And we have a total amount of how many people on?
Well, some are part-time, but equivalent of 6.
Equivalent of 6 people, and some are part-time because as far as radiation, there's different types of people that we need and different things that haven't happened.
As an example, we have different needs regarding engineers, so we bring in engineers as we need them. So when we would need a structural engineer, we would have a person designated for that. When we need a, electrical engineer, we bring in a different person. So that's why I say the equivalent of 6.
But we do have one full-time project manager now.
We do, and we have since, I believe February, so he's been in now for 3 months.
Okay.
Maybe slight tangent, but there was the NRC coming to town to do a presentation.
Yeah, John.
Yes,
Can you tell me about that?
yes. In the end of March, we filed our post-shutdown safety, post-shutdown decommissioning activities report, the PSDAR. Part of the requirement of filing that is that the commission hold a public meeting within 90 days of that filing. They now have that scheduled for May 31st.
And are we involved in that at all? Is that something they do, or?
No, it is an NRC meeting. Obviously, we'll be there, and it's really up to them as to whether or not they want to have us respond to anything, but it really is their meeting.
Have any sense for whether or not those typically garner much attendance? Yeah.
I think it depends on the locale. And
It's
so,
a DoubleTree this time.
No.
yeah,
I've attended many of them in the past 8 years.
Are you lonely when you're there?
There's
Times.
sometimes it was very busy, but lately it has, it has not been too busy. Summer folks,
It
well,
may have slowed down
expect
now,
some
I
people
suppose,
here.
but it's pretty busy certain
Some good-
times, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Everybody's welcome.
Okay, thank you.
They're the ones who sort of run the program. They're there to answer questions. They do a little presentation, and then they sort of mull around and answer questions if we have any about the decommissioning and that. It's an interesting thing to attend. I always attend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary, I have a quick question. I've been asked by some constituents, and ratepayers. They said, is there any plan for Fort Calhoun in, say, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Is it going to be a greenfield, or are things going to be sold or dismantled, or?
so what we filed with the commission actually took us to a greenfield situation. I will say what's required through the commission is that we eliminate all residual radioactivity from the site, and then it's really an OPPD management decision to go to greenfield. But that is completely what we have told the commission that we would do, is to take it to a greenfield situation.
And as you may recall, we have a fund that has been created to really move the plant to a greenfield site and then utilize that site for either other OPP operations, future operations, or look at it for some other value or economic needs in the area as well.
And that was included in the cost estimate that you saw last year when we made this decision. So the greenfield.
Okay. What about the sale? Is there any profitability or financial sense in, does any of the nuclear waste, can it be dissipated quicker, or can it be sold for medical or low level, or is there a market for anything
We are looking at if there is asset recovery viability with any of the equipment that we have. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis, and we have a whole area in supply chain that is actually focused on that for Fort Calhoun.
I think our spent fuel, the answer would be no
No,
on that.
no.
That's
So,
spent fuel.
And
certainly
probably
spent
the
fuel would be no.
radioactive components would be no. However, some of the tools could maybe be utilized at another nuclear facility. We've not typically seen that done. It's easier all around from a financial point of view to send that off as a level waste.
And we have had fuel contracts that we hopefully have settled all the fuel contracts, the
We still
future
have-
fuel contracts.
We still have one outstanding
One out.
that we're working through the vendor and trying to reach an agreement. So that's an ongoing discussion still.
Yeah,
The other three are complete.
good.
Worked through.
When you say that fuel is, fuel, only certain stations take the kind you're using, or if you talk about the fuel we had bought that we're gonna use that we no longer need,
Right.
is it all kind of the same stuff, or is it?
No, there were different phases.
How many buyers are there out there for what we had?
How many buyers?
For what we had, just a lot.
There's still a market for it.
The most recent contract that we settled on was defabrication of fuel assemblies, and that is currently taking place. They're making progress on that. When that's complete, then that will be sold, and we'll get the proceeds from that sale of the material. But I don't know who the buyers will be.
Back to Director Barrett's question about future use of the site. Certainly it's too early, but I'm guessing the IEM folks or the IRP folks are thinking if the technology shows up, maybe it could be a storage site. I mean, there are any number of possibilities depending on, and we've got plenty of options down the road, probably.
Sure, we've had several conversations with gas transmission and gas suppliers potentially on some cross state gas pipelines potentially moving up to industrial areas north of Omaha that would pass by that site, where we could use that for other options of generation. It could be peaking, could be other kinds of generation that we would want to use with. I think Mr. Dogman may correct me, 6 transmission lines going in and out of there. It's great from a reliability perspective. And so we will look at all those options as we get to that. But there's quite a bit of that property that we don't utilize today. And so we will look at a variety of different options maybe in the future.
There's no further questions on that. We'll have John Hanson talk about the oversight.
Thank you, Director McGuire. The first thing, I just want to echo what Mary said about the Decommissioning Oversight Committee. Very good report, some good feedback on some tweaks we could make. Notably, some of the regulatory submittals that have been made have been high quality and well prepared, and I think we're ahead of the game as far as that goes, as far as getting them submitted to the NRC and getting reviews underway. So that was a real positive feedback from them. As far as nuclear oversight, I have 3 things. The Nuclear Oversight Group completed the management-directed assessment, and what we do is we anticipate what the NRC will be inspecting over the quarter, and we try to get ahead of that and do our own inspections or assessment ahead of time and identify any potential areas that need to be shored up. So we completed that in the second quarter. We also completed corrective action program audit on May the 2nd, and I would tell you that went pretty good too. The only thing that we noted was the station needs to continue to focus on procedure use and adherence during this time when there's a lot of flux. We're reducing the amount of procedures, making changes to adjust to decommissioning, and so we need to be very aware of that and very focused on continuing use and adherence to procedures as we go forward. The only other item I have is that recall last month we had the identification of asbestos, and we worked through that at the station and with our environmental folks, and mitigated that very well. And then Mary and her team have conducted training for all employees at the site, and so I think we're on the right path there to address that as we go forward. So that concludes my report. Any questions?
Thank you. There's a lot of good progress going on.
Yeah.
Frankly, it was going a lot smoother than I expected. Whoa, this is great. Yes, knock on wood. Knock on wood. And that concludes the report, if there's no other questions.
See you. All right, Director Galvin, on Public Information Committee.
Okay, thank you. Our committee has a pre-committee meeting on Tuesday. That was to attend. It's my understanding the items covered. 2 items that we will be discussing today. The reporting item and an action item. Reporting item is a legislative update and hopefully we won't look into this kind of
Good morning. Today is the 81st day of a 90-day session of the Nebraska legislature. Earlier this week, they finished the state biennium budget. Rather contentious process of that was going through, but the budget has been adopted at this point. And at the point they're at, they're going to adjourn on May 23rd, which is a couple days earlier than that they had anticipated. So things are moving along quite nicely. I'm going to hit the legislation that we're involved in, and I'm going to talk just briefly about some interim studies that were introduced yesterday, so that you have a heads up of what's coming on. The first bill is LB 143. I've mentioned this bill every time that we've been in here, but this bill basically was amended into LB 263, and it allows vehicle registrations for our fleet to be carried not in the car but in the general place of business. Let me kind of fill you in on what this bill is going to do ultimately for OPPD. What this bill ultimately does for OPPD will allow our fleet to be licensed with what's called public power plates. So there'll be permanent plates, so that every year the fleet transportation doesn't have to run out and put a plate on the car every year, or a sticker. Doesn't sound like much, but when you're doing that to 1,400 cars, it's about a $50,000 savings to have it centralized and have permanent plates placed on the car. With this bill, it had the emergency clause on it, meaning it passed when the governor signed the bill. So Mike Donahue, who's in charge of transportation, will be able to license the fleet under this new law, saving considerable people power and time to get the job done. So that one has been signed by the governor and is moving on quite nicely. My next one is LB 389. 389 is a bill that dealt with small wireless carriers, and I've done this so many times I can do it from memory. The bill basically had a process outlined in the Federal Communications Bureau Commission to allow wireless carriers of small cells to do a standardized process in states to get their facilities hung on transmission, distribution, and communication towers. The Public Power, Nebraska Power Association put together an amendment that basically would have exempted transmission towers, distribution towers, and communications towers from the bill. When push came to shove, there was a phrase in there that talked about fair and reasonable rates. The committee didn't adopt that process, so the NPA decided to continue to oppose the bill. OPPD's official position on the bill is that we're neutral on the bill. There are moving parts at this point on how this is going to come together. It's been pushed over to an interim study that will take place during the interim between this year and next year. And if things change drastically, we might change our position. But at this point, I think being on a neutral position until some of the pieces get settled is the place to be. And lastly, on the bills that I'll report, LB 430. LB 430 eliminates the requirement for environmental services from surveillance services from the Department of Health and Human Services. It's an $87,000 a year fee that we pay to the state of Nebraska. It was signed by the governor yesterday, eliminating that we don't have to do that once it becomes a non-operating power plant. It was signed by the governor yesterday and will go into effect 90 days after his signature. Any questions about the bills that I've highlighted here so far? Yesterday there was a series of interim studies that went in. You don't have them because I just want to give you a little flavor for what they are. There's a study on public power in Nebraska by the Natural Resources Committee. One that kind of surprised me was there's a broadband public entry into telecommunications that Senator Friesen and a couple of others introduced on behalf of the Telecommunications Committee. Senator Wayne wants to study the benefits of unbundling the bills. Senator Kolosky wants to examine solar development in Nebraska. Senator Wayne introduced a legislative resolution to look at eminent domain, and Senator Brewer introduced a resolution to study the moratorium on building wind development, industrial wind development in the Sandhills. That was a bill that he introduced earlier this year. Don't have a lot of detail at this point because they were just introduced, so they'll be referred to a committee. Some of them will get studies. None of them have any fiscal notes to them, meaning that there's not a consultant or somebody secondary that's going to do the study. They'll be assigned to the committees, and they can range from doing nothing to doing a full-scale written report. So the session is pretty much wrapping up, and I'll have one more report in June, and I'll have more detail for you on the legislative resolutions and the interim studies. questions I can answer.
I got a comment. I think you did a great job as far as all the power bills that were introduced this
Thank you.
year. A lot more than normal. Obviously, they were pretty major bills. To get the information out, enjoy something going on, but then also being active and getting those other bills past that licensing thing alone. Well, that's a lot of saving, a lot of work. I bet other people can benefit from that too.
Yeah, over the years, as we've done this process, there's others who said that they would like to do the process. In fact, kind of almost a little bit jealous that the process has been in place. And I said, well, write a bill and join in, you know, and figure out how to get it done. But it will.
I thought, you know, we did a good job just paying attention to everything and getting our views out. Those are big bills that usually don't come along every year, hopefully.
And we're gonna continue to
I
get the
know,
word out.
now these studies, I guess, will keep you busy this summer, so.
Yeah, yeah. It's not going to stop. It's going to continue on.
Just one follow-up question based on the comment you just made. What is the process moving forward if someone wants to write a bill about a new item?
Wants to develop a bill?
Yeah.
Normally what happens in the fall, we go out, we go out on the road to division managers and management and talk about, you know, what they need for operational issues to get done. If you're asking the board, is that what you're asking, if the board wanted to do one? Or?
Just asking the process.
The process is in the fall, I go out and meet with division managers and vice presidents, kind of garner what's needed for the upcoming year. You know, one thing we've talked about is some safety-related things for people out in the field. That, you know, that's something that's going to probably get drafted for next year. So we'll kind of shut down. To be quite honest, it's kind of like going to college. You know, everybody is excited to see you and ready to adjourn when spring comes and stay away from each other for a little while and then kind of regroup and get back together. So it's an intense process.
Yeah, but I think your point is, so the example would be the work we've done primarily on some of the nuclear bills. So that was one that Mary identified early in the middle of the summer, early in the fall. We began to craft what that would look like. And then we begin to identify a sponsor for that bill, or at least begin to vet that around to others that may have interest in that bill, even those that may be against that bill, just so we understand what the issues are. And then once you identify a sponsor of that bill and the committee that that bill would fit into, then we begin to work that bill in that process.
All right.
So, good enough.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
What do we know about the interim study? Public property is going to be, which senators are going to be involved? Is OPPD involved at all? Or?
Well, we'll be, the Power Association, the Nebraska Power Association, will have a coordinated effort in how we respond to the interim studies. As an individual utility, we'll be involved as well. I think the main study is the one that Senator Hughes is doing. He's the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. Senator Wayne has introduced a couple other resolutions, and I need to get more detail on them. But I'm thinking that the committee will have more, Senator Hughes will have more pull on what's going to take place for the study than individual senators writing what they want to see in a study. Not that they're not important, I just think the chairman usually carries a little more sway in what's going to get studied for the interim.
And the full Natural Resources Committee will be involved in some way?
So they're invited, they do, I'm guessing they'll do public hearings. You know, they go around the state normally, usually starts around fall. And then they take public comment at those hearings at that time. And sometimes committee members are there, sometimes they're not, depending on what their schedules are. Usually it's the chairman and a couple key members that are involved in it.
Will you let us know when those are happening?
I will.
And initially, when we talked to Senator Hughes, he thought that he'd have 2 public hearings and so forth, one closer to the metropolitan area and then out into the rest of the state.
Okay.
For those power ones? For which ones?
The public power, the overall public power.
Is that a committee study?
Senator Hughes has a bill that he introduced on behalf of, a legislative resolution, interim study on behalf of the committee, and it basically focuses on jurisdiction, what local boards of directors do, what the Public Service Commission does, what the Nebraska Power Review Board does. His is a little different than just flat out just let's study deregulation or eminent domain like Senator Wayne is suggesting. He's a little more broad in how he wants to look at it from a jurisdictional perspective.
In those discussions, you mentioned the Nebraska Power Association. So not only let us know, this is my request, when those public hearings are held, but it would be nice to know the sense of what the MPA is saying.
Yeah.
So that's back to you, I guess.
I appreciate.
Just us thinking, one thing on those studies, sometimes they go in saying, I'm looking for all this bad stuff, and what they end up finding is it works pretty well. So it's a great educational opportunity for us to say, hey, I didn't know what did work. I mean, a lot of times they go in with one attitude and come out, it's like, this is very different than I thought. So I think that would be the case.
And I do think, especially with term limits, I think that people have discovered that education is the key to keeping people in the know about what's going on, and that's what we'll work to do as well. I appreciate your support this year, so thanks very much. Thank you.
We have one other item, it's an action item. It's the annual review of our SD2, which is the competitive rates, the monitoring report. And Tammy Monroe will give us a report. Okay.
Good morning again. Thank you, Director Kavanaugh. So I'd like to present the monitoring report for SD2 competitive rates. And the directive actually, go to the next slide. Oh, I haven't, I'm sorry. Okay, so the directive is derived from the board directives. It gives us a rate target of 20% below the West, North Central, Regional, and it's based on average system pricing. Has 6 principles in the SD, and the first one is to maintain fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory rates. The second one is equitable assignment of costs across and within customer classes. Pursue rate process and structure changes to reflect the cost of energy when it is used. Offer flexibility and options. Be simple and easy to understand, and to encourage demand side and energy efficiency. So the rate target is based on the Energy Information Administration, the West North Central region, and the states that are included in that are North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. This happens to be the same region and the same metric that the rating agencies specify and hold us to when we go in for ratings. This slide shows you the rate, our history of our rates. So to explain this slide, we start at 0%. Down the left-hand side is how far below the regional average our rates are. We're showing 1995 to 2016 actuals, and then 2017 projection. And then the right axis is our off-system power prices, megawatts per hour. So on the graph, you'll see a brown line, which looks kind of orange there. And that's how far below OPPD's rates are below that regional average for each one of those years. The blue line we've put in is our off-system sales price, and you can see there's some correlation between those two, or historically there has been. We started in 1995 at 10.5% below the regional average. The lowest we've achieved is 14%, and that was in 2008. And then our rates have escalated since then. And up at the top, I put in a few of the factors that have caused the escalation in those rates over time. So in 2007, we had started financing the construction of the Nebraska City 2 unit. And so we had principal and interest payments that needed to be covered by rates. And then the next thing that happened was the recession came in, which did 2 things. It affected the interest rates that we were getting to finance that NC2 project, as well as the funding of major liabilities. So OPEB, the retirement plan, and then the decommissioning funds. The next item that happened was coal transportation contracts. And in 2009, we had a very large escalation in those transportation contracts for coal. So that caused a very large increase in the FPPA rate that time. And then the last contributing item was the 2011 flood, which all of you know affected the operations at Fort Calhoun. And then we ended up going into NRC oversight 0350, which caused additional expenditures. So that's kind of the reasons for the escalation. The good news in this, if you go out to 2016, based on the preliminary EIA data, and that will be finalized later this summer, last year we ended the year at 6.6 below the regional average. Our projection at the end of 2017 is to be 12.9 below the regional average. Now the six principles in this SD, the first, I'm going to cover these two at a time. The first one is maintain fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory rates and equitable assignment of costs across and within customer classes. To support those two, we have rate classes that are based on customer usage characteristics. We use industry standard cost of service principles to allocate costs across all of those customer classes. The rate design strives to align revenues with our fixed and variable costs. And then the entire process is reviewed by an independent third party, which works for the board, and that is currently the Brattle Group. Principles 3 and 4 are to pursue the rate process and structure changes to reflect the cost of energy when it is used and to offer flexibility and options. Now, advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI, is really required to fully implement rates that would be based on time that the customers use energy. So the steps we have taken is we are currently underway with an AMI pilot program, and my rates group is also monitoring rate structures in areas where AMI has been fully deployed. So we understand all of the options people are using and all of the positive and negative things about those rates.
When will we hear about that rate, the pilot program for the AMI?
Probably later this fall, when we have some operational. I think, as I reported last month, is that we're nearing the finalization of all the construction of that, and it'll give Mo and his team an opportunity to kind of do some of the evaluations of that on the distribution automation initiative. It's a small AMI, 12 meters or something like that.
Yeah, just about
It's in northeast Omaha.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes, somewhere between Maple, Ida, 29th to maybe 58. That's the present. Yeah, but.
So once we get some operational data and just get a sense of what that looks like, we'll come back and give an update to the board.
As far as timing, we wouldn't expect to put any AMI in for 2018 yet.
I
Because
think-
we'd have to put the infrastructure in first and everything and costing and everything.
Correct. I think what you may see is that with some of the experience that we may see with the pilot and with some of the work our customer experience team is doing and our integrated energy marketplace team is doing, you may see a recommendation come in 18 for what that rollout may look like. That would be ours, and then how we would be in a position to finance that or not finance that, what would the rate impact be, all those pieces to it. That would be our plan probably.
Yeah, exactly. Once we go through the evaluation, and we'll feed that into the integrated.
Resource.
Right,
So 18 will be a working year for this, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, we really wanted to have a year experience from our own operational side, and to really understand the impacts to us and the technical and the talent needs that go along with it for us to begin to think about what that rollout is. And that rollout, is potentially in the $100 million range potentially, so it's pretty significant. So as we begin to think about what that looks like, because it's just not the meter pieces, it's the distribution automation components that go along with that, and all the infrastructure and the communication infrastructure. I'm a little bit out of my boundary of expertise right now.
You're
so I'm going to get right back into it. So we'll get back to the board probably later this fall with an update about what we've done, where we are, what we're seeing, and then our intent is, as our strategic initiative teams have gone through their work, is to come back to the board with probably some recommendations and some timelines.
Then you see the plasticity with this, because this would be great for flexibility to have the AMI. At the same time, it's expensive.
That's right,
How
yeah,
do you
look at the
how do you
value
do
and,
it most?
but just too early to make any decisions at this time.
There's a longer conversation.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So as an example of flexibility and options, Rate 261 was designed and approved by you, the board, in January of 17. It was a key element in attracting new development as well as discussions on expansions within our current customer base. It's been a major item of discussions in industrial articles as well as forums, and it creates a solution to meet corporate customer renewable objectives. It's consistent with the process, with the principles of being equitable assignment of cost and full recovery from those customer classes, and then offers flexibility and options. So the last two principles are to be simple and easy to understand and encourage demand reduction and energy efficiency. To support those principles, all of our rates are available on our website. 52% of our annual average peak demand is under tariff with demand charges. Curtailable and time of use rates are available to those demand customers. And then the demand reduction and energy efficiency are encouraged through offerings of other products and services. The recommendation of management is the Public Information Committee has reviewed and accepted the monitoring report of SD2 and recommends that the board find OPPD to be sufficiently in compliant with board policy SD2. And then there are no recommended changes by management to this policy at this time.
As a chairman of the board, as a chairman of the committee, I feel confident we're in compliance. Does anyone have any things related to that, any concerns with that? Again, we'll be voting on it this afternoon.
Sure, I have several comments. So I asked, and thank you, this relates back to a January discussion that I had when I was first looking at strategic directives. And remember in January, my first time here, we didn't even know which committees we were on in January. So, my question about comparing where our rates are compared to the region that we're comparing it to, from an engineering standpoint, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. 70% of the energy, 75%, depending on which utility you are, is based on buildings. And so the weather impact on buildings is a major driver of the energy use. Therefore, it seems likely or logical to me to compare ourselves against buildings not in Alaska, not in Hawaii, but those areas that have the same climate areas that we do. And so that's why I sent this around. Now, I understand this may not be the time to talk about this change, and so in July, I guess this is where this would go.
Yeah, this is the
Just in compliance with what we have.
compliance with existing policy.
Yeah, and so I recognize that, but I'm raising the issue because I want to make sure that we talk about it in July. About this, though, I'm curious. Many of the strategic directives do have more than one subcommittee working on it. And so I'm wondering why the Finance Committee, since we're talking about cost of service, since we're talking about a lot of finances related to this, why the Finance Subcommittee isn't also an approver of this.
We have quite a few that overlap.
See, most of them is the committee, typically one committee has the SD that they bring to the full board for approval. Now, the SDs may have, well, yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they all have an owner in a committee that then comes back. Now, the SDs do impact different kind of pieces to that, right? So from a customer experience or from a customer sat perspective, from rates to the finance side on competitive rates to, a number of different things. So they all kind of, an individual issue may tie in different committees of the board, but one committee brings the SDs typically back to the board for approval and discussion and comment.
Right. So I would add to that, as far as working on resolutions or proposals for this,
Sure.
It's very cross-functional. It's all the way from, we're working with the customer group and the customer representatives to understand what customers want, bounce ideas off of them, and then the finance group is actually one that puts the corporate operating plan together. Separate group in finance does the rate design, and so there's a coordination of all of those people before we would use the stakeholder process in that group. And sometimes Mo's group gets very heavily involved in where cost allocations go. So it really is a cross-functional effort to try to design the rates and make sure we're doing it appropriately.
Okay. So revisions that are needed, areas where we compare would be one that I would encourage us to discuss and evaluate. Fairness, our definition of fairness is?
That language is just the state statute. And so, you know, we try to provide the lowest cost, most reliable product and price it that way. So our definition of fair is it as low cost and possible as possible.
And so I'll point to the energy burden studies that are on the NEAM site, and I've asked the author of those if he would do us the favor of comparing our service area to nearby states. He's overwhelmed and overworked, as are we all. But I think sometime we will see that. And there's nothing that would prevent us from developing our own energy burden comparison to other states in our region, other utilities that we like to compare ourselves against. And I think that's another measure of fairness that we might want to at least look at.
So that is an issue for them, this particular.
So revision.
I think it's, I mean, you know, when we talk about it, that's why we're having a group discussion at this point. There are a lot of reasons why we came to these SDs in prior years, but we got input anyway, so.
Yeah, I got one more.
Yeah.
So I would say to that, when we did do the rate restructuring, we did work closely with Julie and Lisa's group and did do analysis, and that's out of that came the low income, low usage credit that we designed because we were looking at affordability. So we have done some work around that.
Back here to flexibility and options.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Always good to have institutional memory. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to figure out what kind of measure we have to show that we're encouraging energy efficiency. Is there any kind of outcome that we can show that we've been successful?
Yeah, actually, what we'll show is typically what Julie has provided over the course of, I think it was just a couple months ago, February maybe? The sustainability, the DSM emissions. The last night, so that's coming up. So it'll be coming up shortly here on kind of what our additional work we've had on both the variety of different DSM and energy efficiency programs that we'll put together. So you'll see some of that progress on that.
Showing publish that. We publish a pamphlet for that.
Sorry.
We publish a pamphlet for that too, right?
We don't publish the pamphlet anymore, we rely upon
Water.
And just to not put too fine a point on it, there is a difference between DSM and energy efficiency.
Yes.
So it's the energy efficiency I'm most keenly interested in, and the measures that we have on that.
Are you talking about energy efficiency for just average businesses, ratepayers, or what are you talking about?
Everybody.
We do hundreds and hundreds of things to promote that. I don't say, are you talking about how we measure it, of these hundreds of things?
Are we successful in our encouraging? Do people adopt? Are they showing energy?
That's difficult to measure. That's like kind of inventive class.
Well, I think we're certainly seeing it in our load forecast. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So
You
we.
see it in that, you see it in our, I guess, the success of our rebate programs that we have available to customers.
For years, we would see gradual increase in demand. Didn't that kind of level off? I mean, it was a real steady growth. a year, but then it kind of level off, and one of the reasons for it probably conservation.
Yeah, we're starting to see it. Some of the meter studies that we do on customers, we certainly see that very clearly.
Yes.
Certainly new homes are lower energy or higher energy efficient than newer homes of 10 years ago, no doubt about it. And the retrofits that are occurring on appliances, we see that in our metered studies that we do on test meters that we have throughout our district, that we test and see that level of energy efficiency going. Some of that has to do with our appliance recycling program, some of the work we've done historically, some of the new things that we've done on DSM and on energy efficiency, kind of the, I want to call it the Step Up program, but that's not right. It's
The Smart Steps.
Smart
So
Steps
the Smart
program,
Steps
thank you.
program that we offer, that's probably one that struggles, that where we're encouraging it, but we're not seeing people let us come into their home.
So two things, I guess, about energy efficiency. David Brock, the director of the Nebraska Energy Office, disagrees with the statement, but it's still out there on the Energy Information Administration site. While we have low energy costs, we have high energy consumption for the state. So it makes sense. You sell something that's cheap, people will buy it. But then that also leads to this energy burden issue. If we have a high level of consumption, which then eats up a lot of monthly income. So one of the things that I would encourage OPPD to do is when we're comparing ourselves to the best in class, or when we're comparing ourselves to others in the region, is take a look at our energy efficiency programs. And this is where we have an SD that actually talks about it. Short of trying to develop a new SD, how are we comparing our energy efficiency programs? Is my question. So it's a larger issue, but this is where it comes up, and that's where the last thing. When we talk about rate flexibility, you talk about rate 261M, and yet we don't have a lot of customers who can access that rate. When we first passed it, and Tim, and I talked at that point in time, and said, "Wow, this is wonderful. It's great. It's fantastic. How can we tweak rate 261M to serve other areas?" And I know you guys are working on it. And so, any revisions needed? Then I think this is an opportunity to talk about it. So that's what I've got.
No, it is dry time talking, but just at some point, I think the strategic directives that we had are broad-based goals, and then there's fine-tuning that management, the company does. So on 6 where it says encouraging demand reduction in energy efficiency, are we making enough steps in interest? Or the board things that we're providing that leaderships and those things? I think a lot of energy efficiency programs and reduction, we're doing some, maybe not as much as you want. But I don't want to get discouraged, but also we got to look at the majority of what the board thinks is proper, and not just go on one thing because you don't feel we're doing that. So I'll give you a heads up. I don't mean to shoot you down completely, but also I did want to state, I think, for everybody, you got to get a majority of the board to go change these things. So we're going to be talking about this later in the governance process and some of those things. But I know you brought this up a couple times, Director. And like I say, to keep going there, it is fine because it's very important to you. I get that. I'm just saying, when we look at these things, there are so many factors to measure every little thing we do. Sometimes it's a broad focus of are we doing, it's kind of the smell test, I guess. Are we doing a lot? I think we're the leader in the state doing this, but I throw that out there not to be argumentative, just to kind of make sure we don't.
Yeah, we all, and I appreciate that we all have different views. I just talked with a recent new resident to Omaha who told me about when he bought his house over in eastern Iowa. A client came in and said, "Hey, I just saw that you bought a new house. Can we do an energy assessment at your house?" Sure, go ahead. Within minutes of showing up at the house, they were changing out the thermostat. They were insulating the water heater. They changed the shower head because there's an energy component to water. And they added insulation in the attic. So that's an energy efficiency program that I think is.
There's hundreds of those out there though for the individual ratepayer consumer to go use. We don't, I mean.
But that was free, provided by the utility.
We also have that similar in the START program.
Also free to everybody. So,
Yeah, I think one thing that we need to continue to keep in mind is a very unique company that tries to sell its product to make money and discourages people from buying it. I don't know of any other company that does it.
My dad was a dentist.
So if McDonald's put a sign out and said, it's more efficient to eat Wendy's, that would be.
If you only eat 2 hamburgers, you have to that one.
My point is that it is a very unique situation. We want to encourage people as much as possible to be efficient. But we also have to remember that every company, if it's going to operate, has to operate at a profit. And one of the things we like to do is not tap that rate increase thing to do that. Now, I realize some of you may think and feel that efficiency and more use of energy that's produced from wind and solar and so forth is worth having higher rates. But when I talk to people on the street, happen to mention I have something to do with OPPD, nobody says to me, oh boy, I hope we're getting more efficient energy. But everybody says to me, keep the rates down without it.
well, so let me chime in a little bit if I can.
I understand your views, and I
Well,
understand
let
the
me-
contrary to what I'm saying.
Yeah, so let me just respond to that. You're right, like, nobody wants to pay more for the electricity that they're using on a monthly basis, but for me, it's about what are you paying per month, not what are you paying per kilowatt hour. That to me is, I think, the more important measure when we look at whether or not we're providing good service to people is that. Honestly, I wouldn't care what the cost per kilowatt hour is if my cost per month is $50 as opposed to $150. So I think what they're really telling you is I don't want to pay a lot. They don't care what the cost per kilowatt hour is. And that's where I think these energy efficiency programs for people are important. I just came off, I mean, Rick and I just got done running a campaign where we talked to a lot of people. So we had on the doorstep conversations with people about OPPD. Very intimate, and we weren't directing them in any, or at least I wasn't, I can't speak for you.
I'm very manipulative.
Yeah. But, you know, the question that I was asking was, what do you think about OPPD? What do you think is going well? What do you think needs to be fixed? And energy efficiency came up consistently and often for people that I was talking to. And it's not unique to Dems or Rs or Ns. Everybody was interested in energy efficiency opportunities. I haven't seen, we haven't been on the board long enough to have gone through the experience of seeing the July strategic directive. So that's, sorry, when I look at this, I too think that the energy efficiency side of this is lacking. I think there's a big opportunity for us to do, and part of that might be just my ignorance about the breadth of things that we do. I mean, our mission is to provide services, not to provide electricity. Our mission is to provide these energy services. So that incorporates a lot of different things, and one of those things is how can we help our customers pay less? And yes, it's a unique business model, but it's also what our customer owners are asking for.
I want to add one more thing, that, and actually Julie Comstock has been working with this, and she did mention that the Smart Steps program, in my area, which is southeast Omaha, energy burden is a big problem. And that's where, when we did the rate restructuring and everything, we implemented the Smart Steps and everything. And Julie has programmed us Smart Steps that if we see somebody coming in that has trouble, I get phone calls from Julie or whatever saying, this person's having trouble paying their bill and everything. We want to go in there, we want to look at it, we want to help as far as more energy efficiency and everything. A lot of times the people won't let them in, which is interesting. You know, their rates are going up and they don't want them inside. But I think maybe Julie can talk a little bit about an energy burden as far as that. That's Julie's role, and they've done a very good job improving that, but they're running into some headwinds. Because our priority first is not the people who can pay for the energy, you know, people out west and everything can afford energy efficiency stuff. It's people in the inner city that have problems paying the regular bills, have trouble with this, and we're going in offering to do these services free of charge. And we're doing some of that, and we're assisting with that, because that's our priority first. And
Yeah, so we're re-looking at what are the hangups that are preventing people from wanting someone to come into their home and evaluate. And we do the same types of things through that program, as far as, you know, the shower head, the light bulbs, that type of thing. But we have to get in the home to be able to do that. But we are going to evaluate, or have been evaluating, what is the hangup.
And we need to kind of keep moving on, but part of that, I mean, several of us campaigned a lot too, to get on this board. I know you went through, knocked on doors as well. I heard a lot about keep my rates low, reliable, keep the lights on, keep the rates low. I heard a lot of that, and I did hear, some of the energy efficiency things for sure. But I also heard too on the privacy issues, just like the AC management program. I don't want Big Brother knowing what, no, don't hook that up. I explained this to a lot of people. Some love it, some like, whoa, I don't know. So I know what you mean. It's a tough deal. I would encourage though on all these projects, take a harder look at them. Keep work with ideas or whatever it may be, bring it and get buy-in from everybody. But it's a good discussion. Another thing, why it's on this, and that anyone can correct me on this, but my memory was it's on the public information part because it's such a public issue. Rates are the issue. And November, when we do these in December, unfortunately, that's what people care about. Rates of reliability a lot of times. So I think that's why this ended up on public information.
Correct. Rates are.
Because it doesn't cost, but that's why it didn't.
Yeah, rates haven't been part of financing, that's.
No, the corporate operating plan is, and then the rate actions are always in the public information side.
Yeah, that's how it's ended up.
At least in my 20 years.
But there's a lot of moving parts to get to this, and I agree, it's probably one of the, we put it all over OPPD, energy, efficiency, renewables, and all those, so it's a good topic with that.
So, I got a couple more comments. You want me to just talk them away until the board meeting, or do you want me to do it?
Let's go a little bit here.
I like this.
Yeah, no, that's what we do.
So, just a couple, and I'll try and be quick.
It's hard to be quick on these kids.
Yeah.
I
Well, this is important, people, right?
Yeah.
This is the strategic directive that I think almost everything we do comes back. I just pulled up our corporate scorecard, and this is the only one. Actually, there might be another one that is showing yellow for this year, and it was red last year. So it's just when, and this goes back to the question that I asked in our pre-committee meeting about the definition of what it means to be sufficiently compliant. So to me, it's a really simple litmus test to kind of give me a sense for whether or not everything is green except this one. Why is that? So that's a concern that I have. This is potentially maybe a broader issue, but especially for a strategic directive that is as important as this one, I don't feel like I'm getting the full depth of information to really make a good call on this in the span of 6 slides. I mean, we talked about one rate, 261M, which is a really new one. It's a great one, but it's not probably the one that people talk with me the most about. The one that I continue to hear a lot about are rates related to how OPPD treats distributed generation, solar on residential, that kind of stuff. And I get a lot of negative comments on that. So when I think about whether or not we're providing appropriate flexibility and options, 261 is great for a handful of customers, and I hope we're expanding it, but I hear more about some of the current rates that we do have and how limiting they are in some cases.
Well, we all have different customer bases, if you will, or constituents. And not to disparage, my constituents, and I've talked to them on the front doors of their homes as well, they don't care generally, and I won't put a percentage, generally, they don't care where the power comes from. They don't care if it's got a carbon footprint or not. They care what the price of power is. And they certainly don't care to help facilitate or pay for programs that would provide a monthly rate rather than usage. Usage-based is the most fair, and they believe that. They also like the fact that rates are not increasing for 5 years. They're really solar. I've got one guy that mentions solar, and I know it's important to you folks, and it's important if it's an economic plus for OPPD. It's a choice a customer makes. It's a choice that we make to inform them. It's a personal choice. And I appreciate your input, and I appreciate what you're saying, but there's a whole different model out there that I'm involved in, that people that I talk to want, and it's cheap power. That's all I care about.
So let me just ask a question on that, Mick. You said usage-based is the best, that's what they're looking for, right? They want to be charged based on their consumption?
That's our model today.
Okay.
But I think if we transition to a flat rate for everybody, somebody's going to have to pay for somebody else's power, right?
So isn't that part of what happened? I mean, aren't we transitioning that to rate restructuring in some way?
We're still usage-based. Our rate restructure is to deliver services, to get service to you, and all the background processes that happen. You still pay, everyone still pays usage, and that's the way this model is built, and I think it's the most fair.
Well, I agree with you. And, there's no hiding the fact that I didn't agree with the fixed structure.
Sure, that's fine.
I tend to think that it flies in the face of the energy efficiency desires that we have to begin with.
But to create more attention in all this, we do have another strategic directive, and that's environmental stewardship, where a lot of this is where we can also discuss this, which is good. In addition
Well,
to
some of the
rates and
energy
bonds.
efficiency, and that's part of what I
And
think I'm
it's
interested in
intermingled is
July
the problem.
is-
That's where the tension is.
If we've got energy efficiency in this strategitic directive, I think we've got it in another strategic directive, so it feels like it sort of gets diluted to the bottom of many rather than.
In the interest of time, I don't say we should move it on. We're gonna have the government committee to talk about kind of where we're going on the July meeting. So, look, this is a good discussion, and we need to have these discussions. There's gonna be some differences, points of view. It's just the majority, that's the way this thing works, and that's where we're at today. I would encourage, and I don't mean this, I have to watch how I say this, when you've been through several of the rate processes or the structures, and you just kind of learn a little bit more about it, and you guys do a great job of trying to heck, you know a lot about this more than me, I'm sure, but figuring out how the whole thing is coming together, and then you gotta make those decisions between these SDs. So I think as time goes on, and you learn more about these programs, you'll find they're pretty good, or if you find they aren't, then you need to say, can we tweak it and change it, and then bring it back again. It just takes a little time to go through there. That's why we only look at these about once a year, because we don't change things 45 degrees. It's just hard to do. So that, I just throw that out there.
I do appreciate the fact that you mentioned the thing that you feel that the energy efficiency gets diluted because it's in so many different places. And that's, when we talk about the policies, I think we can, in the summary, that's definitely what we should look at. That is something that should be tweaked, that we combine that into one area, and that we should be thinking about.
Possibly.
And where that should, possibly.
Maybe.
But I think that's
Also,
it's a good discussion.
Yeah.
And where can we put that? Does it belong in environmental stewardship, or does it belong in rates, or where exactly does it belong?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good
Yeah,
discussion.
and I had no preconceived notions about what is or is not the right way to go on that, but
Yeah.
I feel like
And that's where Eric Douglas could help us with that, because he works with
Just
some.
quickly on the rate restructuring, my thought on the rate restructuring all along is that it is, if it's tweaked and put at a proper level, which I feel we're close to, it actually is a cost savings device to the ratepayer. Now, I understand that some ratepayers have to pay a little more, some pay a little less, but the overall result reduction in rates overall, which I'm always in favor. And I know we don't want to talk about this anymore, but I'd be glad to visit with you.
Yeah, well, for a certain class, right, as you said, right?
Well, and that's right there is the key. I mean, you gotta go convince 5 people. That's how this works, usually within reason, that those
I'm not out
policies
there
are
to
good.
convince anybody.
I'm not.
No, that's the way it works.
I have no
You
intent
need
of
to
outcome.
convince people, because that's how you, no, that's it. I mean, if you wanna change things, we gotta get those votes and change them.
The rate restructuring, just to be really clear about it from the management perspective, the rate restructuring that we put in place a year or so ago was really meant about getting fixed and variable costs more closely aligned to where they occur.
As far as
Very clear.
That has to do with fair.
And the assumption was that the way we have historically done it and the way utilities have historically done it was the correct way to do that, right? So that was the assumption. And so the assumption is you're doing it the right way, now you're changing it, you're doing it the wrong way. And what we were trying to do was meet some of the other elements within this strategic directive, which was to assign cost where cost occurred. And if you remember, certainly the longer term board members may remember this, from a distribution transmission side, we could have went up to like $75 per customer, right? But that was not where the recommendation occurred at all. And so that is the fixed cost to operate the system regardless of where the energy occurs, because you have poles and meters and wires and substations that are attached to customers, however they use the energy. And so our perspective was, how do you more accurately try to identify those costs and assign those costs in a manner which is more reflective of how customers use them and where the costs are. That's all we were trying to do, is to balance that. And so this is one of those SDs that try to balance so many different things across. This SD, as Director Yoder talked about, from a comparable or competitive side, is there is a variety of ways to do it. What we tried to do was to not have 2 different ways to measure it. So we measured it based on the North Central, just the way our rating agencies look at a competitive threshold for us as, are we competitive within our region? And that's what they use from our financial sustainability strategic directive. And we thought it was important to match those up with our competitive rate strategic directive. Now, if that's not right, we have the opportunity to change it and move in a different direction. What we are trying to do is to create some consistency where you don't want to be driving in one area and then have a negative impact in another. So how do you balance that? And that's been the management team's kind of responsibility, is to try to balance, as well as the board in setting these, try to balance all of these different priorities. And I think we're having the conversation of, it can be difficult sometimes to begin to balance them. Sure. But the conversation and the deepness of it, I think, is valuable for us to have, and it gives the management team an opportunity for us to think about things that we may want to bring to the July 24th as part of that discussion and dialogue as well.
And that process took a year or 2, so we're not getting solved. So with that, we move on to systems management. All right, thanks. System management, Rich, you want to? John?
We met last Monday, and we have a couple of action items, as well as some over 500,000 items. 2 of them sort of coordinated, so I just maybe ask Mo to go through those.
Sure.
My only comment is it's hard to have a power company without a pole.
That's correct. At least at this time, right?
Yeah.
We do have a couple action items, but before I go through that, maybe Vice President Brown would cover the over $500, over $500,000 contract.
I sure can, thank you. This is for Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. It's $1.4 million. This is a 3-year agreement to cover our licensing and maintenance costs for databases and servers in our environment. So that's the amount, and that's what it is. This is down slightly. We're in the process of renegotiating the continuing to renegotiate numbers, so we have some cost savings here. And we continue to evaluate these because these are high-cost items for us in terms of maintenance. Questions?
Okay, no questions. I'll go ahead and discuss the two action items. The first one is for the purchase of the 69 kV and 161 kV steel transmission structures. And those are for the Elkhorn River Valley Transmission Project. You have on the first page the facts. We're going to need about 63 of the transmission structures for the 69 kV portion and 150 for the 161 kV portion. We've received 3 proposals, and they were all legally and technically responsive. You also can see the delivery date, which will start sometime in October and end by February. So basically, we'll be asking the board to authorize management to award this contract to the lowest and best evaluated bid, and that will add Trans-America Power Products for the total sum of $4,404,423. And I'll take questions if you have any.
Hey, Mo, just to revise, how much does OPPD pay of this, and how much does Southwest Power Pool, how much is?
Yes, this project is, we have Fremont Utilities as a partner, and Fremont pays 60% of the cost of the project, and OPPD pays 40%. And because this is a Southwest Power Pool project, we will get reimbursed about a third of our cost because of the voltage level. So this will turn out to be a very good project for OPPD from a reliability perspective and also from a cost perspective.
And we own it and maintain it?
Correct.
Thank you. And John, do we have an update on the...
I have one more action item, if I may, and then we'll take it over to John. The second board action item is for the purchase of 2 auto transformers, and as you can see, one is 345 to 161 kV, and the other one is 161 to 69 kV. And the first one, the 345 kV, the in-service date is June of 2018, and we've had 7 proposals. 6 were legally responsive, and only 2 were technically responsive. So this the best evaluated bid is Hyundai Power Transformers, and the same for the other auto transformer, which is 161 to 69 kV. We've had 9 proposals, and 8 were legally responsive, and only 3 of them were technically responsive. And the same manufacturer, Hyundai Power Transformers, was evaluated to be the lowest and best bid. So we'll be asking the board to authorize management to award the contract to Hyundai Power Transformers in the amount of $4,094,518, and that's for the purchase of both of them.
What was the estimate you thought on that?
The estimate was about 3 to 4% lower than and actually I have the exact number if you like. The estimate was $3.5 million for the first one and $1.4 for the second one. So actually, we did well.
Yeah.
Then was there also a routing update?
No, not at this time.
Then John, you have something here with the Ash landfill update, and I was wondering if you could also give us a little update on the outage.
Yeah, so we gave the landfill update in pre-committee. We don't plan to do anything here today, but with regard to Nebraska City Unit 2, recall we started an outage in April, the 1st of April, and that is coming to a conclusion ahead of schedule, which is good news. They are currently completed the chemical cleaning and are in really a startup mode. They're trying to clean up from that chemical cleaning, and so there are some chemical limitations or specifications they need to meet before they can roll out the turbine. So barring any unforeseen things coming up, that'll be today. We should be able to synchronize to the grid either yet today or early tomorrow. And then we'll go through and do what we call an overspeed trip check, and that's required by our insurance company. Basically what you do is run the turbine generator up above its normal speed of 3,600 RPM, and you look to see that the protective systems trip the unit. So it's a little bit of a abnormal situation. Makes you get a little bit white knuckled when you're doing that, but assuming everything works, it'll be fine. And then after we do that, we'll come on, it'll trip it offline. You'll do final checks, and then you'll come online for the sustain if all goes well. So I just want to remind you, because you all had a part of this, a lot of parts of these projects. Some of the projects we did complete during the outage is replacement of the HPIP rotor that was damaged a few years ago. That's gone well. High energy piping, different sections were replaced, and so that concludes that project that started in 2013 when we found a piece that was bulged. We did the SCR catalyst replacement, that's our NOx control, and then air preheater maintenance. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we concluded with a chemical cleaning, which is essentially runs a chemical through the internal parts of your boiler and cleans any iron you may have and very little amounts of copper. And that's the first time we've done that on NC2, so that was a good iteration there. So that concludes my report, and hopefully in the next day or two I'll have good news that we're back on. And I will recognize the staff. They've, and we alluded to it earlier, that we've had good collaboration with Fort Calhoun. Mo's group is always there to support it, as well as other parts of the district all come together. It's a very integrated, tight schedule that we have to execute, and it's done in a very professional manner and very well timed out. So it's been a good outage, a lot of good work. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Governance, Scott, you're up, my friend.
Great, thank you. We will have the executive.
I think the
After this presentation, we'll go into executive session.
got it. I think that there's some excitement and energy building for the July 24th workshop, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. I can't wait. I'm actually looking forward to the discussion, and really the document today is to provide kind of where we are with it, because there is an opportunity for us to have conversation as we're building the approach to see is there anything that we're missing at this stage of the development. We will refine this and refine this again over the next 60 days so that prior to the session it'll be very clear in terms of agenda and specifics what it is that we're trying to accomplish. In hearing conversations over the past months, really the objective that we see is to review current progress. This was a journey. It began in December of 2014. The board came together, established a framework, figured out the policies, figured out the taxonomy, figured out very specific language for each of the policies, voted on them, and for about the past year and a half we've been monitoring those policies. That in total took about 6 days and 3 workshops and lots of time. The workshop also supports GP3, which the board had requested that on at least a 3-year basis there would be a deep dive into the policies and to really understand their relevancy, their clarity, how things are working, and that kind of thing.
Is the workshop going to be done?
Pardon?
Is the workshop going to be here?
No, it's actually going, and it's going to be at UNO, and we'll get to the logistics on the location and stuff in a moment here. And also, what we're recognizing is the need to have an annual conversation as well. So this workshop will actually be something that will probably take place in February or March of next year, just to keep the conversation going and to ensure that we're able to strengthen the conversation that unfolds over time. As a reminder, the Corporate Governance Initiative really, as it began, set out to do a few things highlighted here: sharpen focus on critical issues, clarify the relationship between board and management, optimize decision-making, and deliver organizational results aligned with agreed-upon policies. We'll have an opportunity at the offsite to look and ask ourselves, how well is this happening? Really, for the board to answer, how well is this happening? How well was the initial intention being manifested through the discussion? There was a lot of effort put in over the last, since December of 2014. This highlights some specifics for the purposes of time, and to get a little bit of time, I won't go through all of them. But we really are in phase 4 here, which is evaluating, refining governance process. We've always viewed this as an ongoing conversation and not a one and done. The policy workshop itself is 8 to 5. It's scheduled at the UNO Community Engagement Center, room 201. The attendees are board of directors, senior management. We've mentioned Eric Douglas. We have some information in here on who he is, what he's done, that kind of thing. And of course, this is also open to the public, similar to this meeting. The goals that we have begun to delineate is we want to ensure there's a mutual understanding around the key factors of effective board governance. There's many different types of approaches, and this was initially reviewed as part of the board discussion when this approach was adopted. So I think it's going to be important to understand what those underlying tenets were, deepen the board's understanding of its approach to governance. Obviously, this is how you want to do it. How do you want to make this work? Identify areas that are working well, what's happening, and then those that could be improved. Develop consensus around specific ways to refine the governance system. We also, if time permitting, would have an opportunity to discuss with you what's going to be an offsite later next month. June 7th and 8th, actually, where it's going to be a strategic planning conversation, some trends reviews, and this kind of thing. As we look at customers, as we look at trends, as we look at advancements in technology, there may be an implication for additional directive or directives where it would be very helpful to ensure that there's a connection between what the board's desires are on behalf of customer owners and what direction we would be taking, similar in following compliance with the directives today. I guess at this point, looking at these goals, I would pause for a moment and just say, are there any additional considerations, or if we begin to really plan an agenda for the day around these goals, are these sufficient in terms of the high-level goals that would feel like a good day if these goals were accomplished?
I think so, Scott. That's aggressive.
Yeah.
They're aggressive goals, yeah.
All right.
Do you have any sense for how the day will be weighted based on those?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, honestly. I think we may find that we'll kind of go through them as the board has this conversation. So we may find, as we talked about, that we have to go longer. We may find that we get done at noon, and it was much closer than anyone realized.
But it's like, I think Eric's going to call. Eric Douglas is the guy who kind of helped us.
He's going to.
He's going to make a few calls to the governance board members, where we at, what's going on, what we're doing now, and probably even give a call to Ann since she started this stuff off and still has great ideas. And just Eric's going to say, what do you want to do? What do you think? That's probably how we're going to start framing any other.
And if I can add to that, there will be also a survey of all board members and all senior management team, and I think that's going to be a heavy data opportunity to provide some data. Additionally, Kim will be going out. So actually, if we can hold on one second, I'll go through a couple more slides and then finish that thought. So if we look at goals.
Scott, what's
yes.
happening on June 7th and 8th?
This is the senior management team meeting offsite to go through strategic trends with some subject matter experts and figure out. You saw the strategic initiatives that we presented. I think that was in January or February. I can't remember the month now. Really, those were guided for 2017. So we have detailed actions on 2017. The question becomes, well, what does this mean in 2018? So.
I think that was in December. I think it was before.
Actually, no, we did
It
it
was-
when the strategic director folks, I think it might have even been February.
I think it was
January,
February.
We ran through the 7 strategic initiatives and kind of an update. One was a cost estimate and process review, integrated, I know, there's a lot of stuff that's gone kind of under the bridge here over the last several months.
There was a small team of folks that came up and each one of them did a round table and talk
No,
on their
it was in this room,
initiative.
so
Yes,
It had to be
it was in here.
January when we were doing vision tape there. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Any other questions or suggestions on the goals? We'll move quickly. Obviously, one of the conversations, stakeholder engagement, is extremely important. We'll follow a similar process that we did last time. We feel that we're actually doing a very good job in conversations like today over the course of this year. I can't think of one meeting this year, there may have been one, where we've not mentioned the fact that there will be a workshop and it will take place on July 24th and it is open to the public. There will be a formal press release announcing the actual workshop on 7/17, and then of course the meeting itself will be open. What happens after that is as we take input on the policies and drafts, we then revise the policies and bring them back to the board for discussion in a meeting like this. Did we capture everything that was intended through that meeting? That meeting also, like this, is open to the public, and then before any board vote, there's conversation and an opportunity for public to provide input. The policies are posted online for a 30-day review period, so there is an opportunity to go out and provide that kind of feedback throughout the kind of waiting and letting it gel and foment and making sure it's capturing the right kinds of things. And then, depending on conversation, the revised policies would be approved on either September or October. You know, if the changes and the drafts and the feedback are very minimal, it might be sufficient, and we may be able to go forward in September, which I think is what we did last time on one of them, and I think the other one we may have waited a little bit longer to revise, and that would have put the October timeframe. So. Any questions or thoughts on the stakeholder engagement?
Director Yoder was correct and I was incorrect. We did it in December.
Oh, we did it in December.
I'm not going to give up yet. But our plan is after we kind of do our June kind of event, we'll come back to the board and give an update on those strategic initiatives and where we are in those.
Got it.
Yeah, it would
Great.
be nice to have that before this.
Probably won't be able to do it before, but you have to get them to some piece where it's valuable to come back.
Right.
But we'll make that assessment.
We will know more on the 8th for sure. Yeah.
The December one, we were not recording this. That was a committee meeting.
He was here at this point.
Yeah, I don't know where we were.
No.
But there were slides.
There were slides.
There were slides, correct?
There were slides.
And so those are available.
They're on OPPD.com. And I can send them.
Any questions on the stakeholder? Eric, you'll come to know him, I think, very well. I don't know if there's any comments from board members that experienced him regarding Eric, but I think you'll enjoy him. He's actually very good at facilitating and engaging people in conversation and figuring out how to move conversation forward in a way that feels, okay, it's right to move it forward now. So. And then finally, with regards to next steps, as I mentioned, Kim and I are in the process of really gathering information. Some information would be, for example, the board survey that you had filled out on the GP and the BLs. We will be asking for feedback on SDs, thoughts around specific changes, this kind of thing. And those will be all shared with Eric. And then we'll conduct a survey, or actually Eric will conduct a survey of board and senior management team and then analyze the results, and that will be part of the conversation as well. We will be developing the workshop agenda, and part of that will be triggered by things like survey findings, to your point. They will be, how we choose to initially weight the day will probably be influenced by certain factors as we're gathering them. then facilitate the workshop and document the outcomes. So at this stage, any questions or feedback on approach, additional things that need to be accomplished, or anything on the stakeholder?
Process looks good. I guess I'm kind of wondering what, we can certainly respond to the survey, but do you have, especially for new board members, any suggestions on homework?
I will be
Preparation?
I'll be sending you a
Yes.
homework email.
All right, great.
Yes.
And
Craig, it's the summertime, okay?
We intend for this to be a continued conversation, so in June we would also be bringing back some more information. At that time it'd be closer to the July. So our goal always in all these is to make sure that it's very clear going into it what's going to happen, have an opportunity for feedback to help shape that, and then make sure that you get as much information as we know we can provide that would allow you to review, prepare. So.
I think how we have done this in the past is that there may be a variety of items that there is great consensus on right away. In the pre-work, we'll try to identify those early and move those on, right, very quickly. But there may be spots where there is a difference of thought and opinion and the arrays are different, where the discussion and dialogue needs to be deeper. Those are the ones we'll prioritize to spend the time on, is kind of the plan.
Yeah. And it'll be more priorities around substance, to your point, you know, the substantial disagreement versus if there's word selection choices and certain people like words, we'll probably move those on pretty quickly as well.
Sorry, one last question. We're all obviously talking with our constituents on a regular basis, but you guys have good data from your customers that, over the course of many surveys over the course of time, that will give us a good sort of snapshot for what customer expectations are. And maybe that will be part of the homework.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
Yes.
We'll take a look at that, Julie and I, really look into the background reading material.
Yeah. Great.
And I think at the highest level, there would definitely be customer survey data, even like J.D. Powers and things that would help influence and understand.
So the timing's going to be good on that as well.
Yeah. And the relevant factors.
And maybe after this date, though, typically it's that last week sometime, right?
But they can review last times.
Yeah, that's true.
At least last times, yeah.
Right.
Business ones, every year we went.
And part of that is the prioritization of factors, the importance of rates, reliability, and relationship, these kinds of things. It helps provide insight into the order of magnitude of importance over one thing over the other. Again, it's on an average and as a whole, but you do get some insightful information by looking at it. Good. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further before we go to executive session? Hearing none, I move the board go into a closed session at 12:07 p.m. to consider the appointment of a corporate officer and an update and strategy discussion regarding collective bargaining matters and labor contracts. With respect to the appointment of a corporate officer, this closed session is necessary to prevent needless injury to reputation, given that the discussion will involve evaluation of the potential officer's job performance, and this individual has not requested a public meeting. With respect to union negotiations, a closed session is necessary for the protection of the public interest because of the discussion of confidential matters related to the collective bargaining and labor contracts. Anyone move?
Move, I second.
There, we have a motion and a second.
Barrett,
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Gay,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Mines.
Yes.
Yoder,
Yes.
motion carried, 7-0.
All right. The motion to go into closed session is passed. This closed session will be limited to the consideration of the appointment of a corporate officer and an update and strategy discussion regarding collective bargaining matters and labor contracts. No other board action will be taken during the closed session. Motion and a second is required to reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Barrett,
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Gay,
Yes.
Hurley,
Yes.
McGuire. Yes. Mines.
Yay.
Moody.
Yes.
Yoder.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, the motion to come out of closed session at 1:04 PM is carried. This closed session was limited to the consideration of the appointment of a corporate officer and an updated strategy discussion regarding collective bargaining matters and labor contracts. No votes or board action were taken during the closed session. Thank you.
Thank you.